So look, thank you very much for giving up some of your time to come and have a conversation with us on the TekCurious podcast. For those people that haven't seen it or listened to it before, I guess kind of the podcast is about talking to some really good influential leaders within the technology space around sort of their journey, their sort of career, how they started out in tech and sort of how they've got to where they are. And then I kind of like just to spend a little bit of time delving into sort of some of the challenges, maybe some of the things we think we could be doing to kind of drive more people into careers in IT, because I think that's one of the big challenges we've got. So look, I'll hand over to you. I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we'll get cracking.
Cheers. My name's Anouska Streets. Everyone calls me Noosh. I am the CTO at Zappo Bank. I've been there for about 2.5 years now, building a team to develop a new banking solution that kind of bridges traditional finance, so traditional banking, with Bitcoin.
Fair play, pretty cool.
Very cool.
I suppose that we get to talk about that a bit later on, but I guess kind of what would be really interesting, Noosh, is all right, is kind of cast your mind back to when you were sort of maybe back at university, or even a bit before that, if kind of before we got to university. I guess was it always a career in IT you wanted, and what made you kind of decide that was the route to go down?
Yeah, I've been really clear about it from a really early age. I was in school one day, and somebody bought in, I think I was in junior school, right? So somebody bought in a BBC Micro computer. I was like, oh, what's this? And I just thought it was amazing. You could kind of type and things would go on the screen, you know, and the teacher there saw that I kind of took an interest in it, and spent a bit of time with me doing some kind of basic programming, that really, really basic stuff, right? And that computer had stayed in the school for a little while, and my parents kind of got wind that I was really into it. And one Christmas morning, there was a Commodore 64 there, and I was like, oh my God. So of course I used it to play games the same as any other kid, but I also got into some programming there. So you know, I ended up kind of programming kind of these, I don't know if you remember these games where you used to kind of, you are in a room and there is a table and there is a loaf of bread on the table, and I'd mapped out this whole world and I'd made this game. It was great. And so I kind of knew that's what I wanted to do. And then nothing else ever kind of got in, right? I didn't even consider any other careers. I was just going to go and work in technology. So that's what I did. I went to university, did a degree in computing at uni. I did a sandwich course, so I was fortunate enough to be placed at British Steel in Port Talbot, where I made friendships and relationships that I still have to this day. And that was it. That was the start of my career. I finished my degree and I ended up going back. Then they invited me back to go and work for them full time, and that was the start of my career in tech. So it was a relatively clear, frictionless kind of path, to start in my career. It was unbelievable, really.
Fair play. No, well, I guess there's not many people I speak to on here that kind of had such a clear idea from such a young age, and that's what they wanted to do. But brilliant to see you've done it and achieved it, which is really good.
Yeah.
So I suppose then one of the questions then off the back of that, right, is obviously sort of being a female, and I guess kind of when you sort of decided that kind of technology was the one. I'm guessing there probably weren't many other people like you on your course back then at university, or were there? How did you find that?
Not at all. There was myself and two others. And what I always found really funny was whenever anybody people would come up to me and they'd say, oh, where is so and so? Because they just thought, because we were the three women on the course, we knew where each other was all the time. And it's like, I don't know. I built my own kind of friendship groups. But yeah, it was, I've always been really comfortable in kind of male-dominated environments anyway. I've got two younger brothers, and I was always a bit of a tomboy as well growing up, so I played with BMXs and kind of did quite kind of boyish things, I guess. And so I never really saw it as an issue for me personally. And in fact, I've always quite enjoyed it. but yeah, it was. I was one. I think I think there were about 200 on that course. You know, you'd go into the common room and there'd just be a sea of, you know, blokes. If you could see them through the smoke, you were still allowed to smoke in the common room in those days.
Brilliant, fair play. So finished university, went back to where you did your sandwich year then. So I guess it'd just be interesting to get a brief synopsis then of kind of the steps you made. Was it always kind of within the software engineering space that you've moved your career? And I guess then sort of what was that step as well, if you want to kind of include that in the answer, Anouska, sort of when you decided and how you decided to make that jump, I suppose, from being just a hands-on software engineer to kind of becoming that sort of leader, manager, and how you kind of, did you do that in the same role, or did you kind of move roles to get that responsibility? How did you kind of do that?
It was all quite organic. I left British Steel again to become an engineer at a much larger organisation that was more consultancy based. And what I found while I was doing that role is I was able to take kind of business requirements and bridge that gap, right, between what the business is trying to achieve for its customers and how you could turn that into a solution in technology. And I actually ended up, for a period of time, coming away from technology almost altogether. And I ended up being an account director and managing lots of teams of people, helping to define solutions, almost like a bit like an enterprise architect and then account director. And then I got pregnant back in 2003 and had my daughter. And I came back into that role, which was a very, it was a director level role, and I was doing traveling all over the UK, and it was like, oh my God, I've got this infant daughter at home. It was an opportunity to kind of look back and go, am I doing what I want to be doing right now? I was feeling that I was getting further and further away from the actual technology. And I decided to go back as a mid-level Java programmer. And I just found a job for 4 days a week at actually company's house, so as a civil servant, and I loved it. I thought, this is what I like doing. I like the technology. I like being close to technology and solving problems. But all my friends were like, "You won't last. I give you, I give you 18 months before you're back leading a team or doing something." Because they probably knew before I did that I love kind of people, and I love seeing and helping those people to kind of thrive in their environment, right? And what I found out, and as I said, these people knew it way before I did. I found out that I'm an okay programmer, right? I enjoy it. I still tinker at the weekends and in the evenings. It's something I enjoy. But what I found is I was working with people who were just exceptional, right? Like would blow me out of the water. And what I found is I really enjoyed helping them be great. Mm-hmm. So I've got the technology kind of foundations and understanding to be able to have sensible conversations, to be able to break ties, to be able to kind of rubber duck kind of ideas and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, there are generally people who are far better than me who can actually implement those. And so it's what I found is I just really loved being the person that was building those teams, creating an environment where how can we give these people an environment where they can just do their job and be brilliant. And that was a bit of an epiphany for me to realize that. And that's when I realized that's what I wanted to do. And then I kind of moved through various roles as a lead, and then director of engineering, VP of engineering, and now I'm CTO, because and it's all the same stuff, right? It's all about I've got a rule. I always hire people who are better than me, and that requires checking your ego at the door a little bit. But if you hire but realize that they're better than you in that thing that you're hiring them for, right? I can't be across absolutely everything at the level of detail that I need to be across. So instead, you hire amazing people and then put an environment around those people that means they can do their job well. And so yeah, that's a kind of long-winded way of answering your question, I think.
No, I think it's really good. There's loads of stuff you said in there that I'd be keen to kind of just explore a little bit further.
Yeah.
So I suppose casting kind of, obviously you that first role, then you said you moved more into kind of like the account director and EA role and quite a bit away from the technology.
Yeah.
But how important do you think that experience was then to kind of enable you when you obviously clearly went back to Companies House to be the hands-on sort of Java developer? But I guess that probably gave you a kind of a very different set of skills and experiences. Do you think that's kind of enabled you then to kind of get to where you are today? And would you advise sort of people, look, you don't necessarily, if you want to get to being a CTO, have to go down the traditional route of staying as a hands-on engineering lead and that way? And do you think it makes you better for it?
Yeah, I don't think there's a straight line to anything. It's like that kind of meme you see on the internet. It's like, you've got to go down a bit and then up a bit. What you think it's going to do is this straight line, and it's not really. And you've got sharks and you've got mountains to climb, and eventually you get to kind of some point. The way I did it, it absolutely did help me, because what it taught me was it made me massively customer centric. It made me really think hard about why do we build this stuff that we're building? It's like, and I think quite often in technology circles, people often focus more on the amazingness of the solution that they're building and how amazing, how fantastic it is, and look at this cutting edge technology it's using. It's like, yeah, but is it actually solving a problem for your customer? So yeah, that was. It helped me with that. It also helped me with building relationships with stakeholders across all different parts of the business, right? So quite often you're building relationships with people in finance or people in procurement or people completely outside of technology, and helping them to understand firstly what's the value that we can deliver, and also what is it that you need, right? What are the problems that we need to solve for you? So 100%, and that applies daily to what I do today. So that's not saying you can't do it in a straight line, but for me, I think it was, it all builds. It's all those building blocks that kind of make you who you are, right?
Definitely. And looking over your LinkedIn, Anouska, I might be wrong, but it looks like you've always, everything you've done's been perm.
Yeah. Yes.
That's an interesting one. So obviously, a lot of people I speak to that have kind of hit the level that you've got to, kind of in that C-suite or director level, kind of have. Most of them have kind of had a blend of perm and contract, and some of them rave about it and say, look, it's really good because it gives you a different set of skills. But I suppose, was that always intentional to stay perm, or did you have a flirt? Why have you done it? Do you think it makes a difference, or do you think it benefits or not benefits by doing that?
No reason really. I think for me personally, there was a view that perhaps contract was less permanent. And I think I've always wanted to feel like I'm part of something. And if I feel like I'm part of moving something forward. Whereas I think with a contractor mindset, it's more about solving specific problems, right? And then moving on to the next thing. And for me, it's about, and I feel that way, particularly about where I am now. It's like that kind of vision and mission, and being part of moving the needle on that. Being part of that is something that I think is quite important to me.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So I suppose, though, kind of listening to you and looking over your profile before we spoke, sort of, I guess the time you spent at Spring, sort of in more of that consultancy sort of space, I guess that's similar-ish to contracting in the fact that you have to put the customer around everything, and you're expected, I guess, on day one to be delivering results. Otherwise, why are we paying you all of this money? You don't get the first couple of weeks to settle in, work out where the toilet is, the coffee machine is, and that stuff.
No, that was, and actually that was managing teams of consultants, right, who were people who were there temporarily to solve a very specific problem quite often.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were longer kind of lived relationships, but a lot of them were short term, 6-month type relationships that, you're going in to solve a very specific problem. So in that way, I kind of got the best of both worlds, right? So yeah, it was, but yeah, but again, there was an overall kind of mission around, delivering value rather than just bumps on seats.
Yeah, makes sense. And then I might be wrong here, right? So apologies if I am, but it looks like since you kind of moved on from Companies House, your career's kind of been built then around sort of the fintech and financial services space pretty much. So
Yeah.
was that intentional? And do you think, again, is that sort of helped you? Because again, you've done good stints at each companies, but again, you've moved on to kind of, it seems to kind of get that next step up or promotion. So do you think it benefits people if you stay within a specific sort of sector, and does that kind of, again, help speed up the process to get to that top level role? Or what's your take on that? Because I suppose from a recruiter's perspective, sorry, to speak, is I guess kind of, especially within financial services, fintech, people like people to come from that background, if you'd like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be interested to just get your take on that.
I think it's I have been throughout my career is kind of pinpointed by just luck. Luck and the right support from the right people at the right time. And I just, I went from Companies House, monetized as it was then, set up kind of down the road from me. They were recruiting a whole new team. Sounded like they were doing something really interesting. They were kind of leaders in the space at the time of financial apps on your mobile phone, which was just, something that was quite, we all do it now, take it for granted. But at the time, it was very, very new. And that just seemed really interesting. And so then you get that break into that domain and into that space. And then, as you move on, you find that, there are other opportunities in that space, and it's a really interesting space. And and what I found is that now I'm working in the crypto ecosystem. The opportunities to learn new things there is just never ending, right? There is more stuff to learn than a single person can learn in a lifetime. And if you are a person that's motivated by personal development and learning new things, it's a domain that really, really interests me. Recently I was, asked about, come work in the insurance industry. And honestly, I thought about it and I was like, oh my God, that sounds really dull. I was just like, I don't want to do it. But it's not to say, I do believe though that a lot of the skills that you learn, regardless of domain, are completely transferable, right? When you're talking about building high-performing engineering teams, of course it helps if you understand the domain, but I don't think it's a prerequisite, right? And so if there's I would say if there was a domain that you were interested in, that you haven't worked in, but you've got the core skills, then I don't think there's anything that precludes you from moving into that. I had no crypto experience prior to working at Zappo. And now I've been completely orange pilled, but it's you can swap it. I guess it depends on the appetite for the employer to take people from those other more diverse backgrounds. I certainly, when I'm recruiting, I don't even have it as a requirement of having worked in this space.
That was one of the interesting. I was going to ask, kind of flip it on his head, really. And you keep kind of half answered it, which is really good. But it's kind of going, well, now you're kind of sat at the top of the tree, right? I guess kind of bringing people in right the way through the range of the organisation. How much value do you place on a couple of things? One, I suppose the industry experience. You kind of answered that. I guess kind of on then, if you're looking kind of more at the entry level roles, right? So traditionally, I mean, I've worked in recruitment for 10, 11 years now, right? And it's changed a lot, but sort of when I first started, it was very much, especially within kind of maybe the financial services space and even sort of professional services as a whole, very much on what university you went to, exactly the course you studied, and then 2-1 maybe, but we really want someone with a first class Karl, mathematics, computer science if it's from a good red brick. Otherwise, not really interested. Obviously, the world's moved on a lot now. We've got apprenticeships, boot camps, and all of it. So, what as a CTO of a really cool business, I'm sure loads of people listening to this would love to come and work for. But I guess, what's your take on that, and how do you lead your team to hire into those spaces?
So, actually, regardless of level, I care more about behaviours and aptitude than almost anything else. And so we have a set, there's a set of values, and there are a set of kind of principles that are kind of fundamental. Can you work in a team? Can you effectively collaborate? We do pair programming, right? Are you okay with that? Are you okay? Are you prepared to mentor and coach more junior team members? What are your views on quality and speed to market? And how do you think about the customer, right? All of these things are super, super important, regardless actually of your level, right? And then obviously the more senior you get, there are things you can test, right? Can you write me some code that does this? Okay, cool, great. At a more junior level, then it just comes down to aptitude, and you can test for that as well. And so once you've got aptitude and behaviors, everything else, even the domain, right? The domain space, anything else is learnable. The rest of it, but you can't. Behavior is the most difficult thing to change of a person, right? And so going for the right behavior, the right fit for your organization, and then checking that they've got the right technical skills to be able to perform the role. Anything else, domain knowledge of this particular weird tool set that we use that only 3 people in the world have got knowledge of, that you can learn all of that, right? Everything else comes down to behaviors.
Makes sense. And I suppose then one of the things I guess keen to get your views on is well known. The more diverse the team is, then the better the performance, and the better the team is. But I guess in technology, I guess it's one of the big challenges, isn't it? I mean, there aren't enough people coming into it that are from sort of diverse and underrepresented backgrounds. And obviously, I guess being a female in a CTO role, I suppose what has been your experience of that, I guess, because I'm assuming, and I'm sure probably over time, that there probably have been more females in the organizations you've worked in and the teams you've worked in, but I guess probably when you first started, and probably even not that long ago, I guess you were probably one of only a few females sat around that leadership table, especially. And what's your bit of experience? How have you dealt with it? Sort of, and I guess it'd be really interesting to hear your own take on that and views.
Yeah, I think it's still not where it needs to be. And there are certain parts of technology where it's still really hard, right? I'm finding now more, particularly with apps development, I've got much better representation. And when I put a job role out there, I get a much more diverse set of candidates to select from on the app side. And then on the kind of back end side, it's not quite as good, but it's still not bad, right? We still get a reasonable representation. And it's when you start looking at platform, you start looking at the stuff that the infrastructure and potentially kind of sysadmin type stuff. That is an area which is very underrepresented by women. And in fact, that's something that I know that well, because that's an area that for the last kind of 7 years, I guess, has been my area of specialism. So finding and I suspect it's because there's this feeling that it's kind of folks in Linux consoles kind of writing shell scripts, as opposed to what is seen as being, I guess, a much more creative endeavor of building an app that people use. It feels a lot more accessible. But yeah, it's from my experience that has been a problem. I think particularly in the UK. Actually, what we do at Zappo, we're in a fully remote organisation, and what I find, there are some geographies globally remote, that is. So I've got, my team is literally, I'm thinking about 50 countries in the world, right? it's mad, and I find there are some geographies where actually, particularly Middle East Asia, there's a much better representation of female candidates than in kind of Western Europe.
That makes sense. And I guess then from your perspective, especially if we're talking about the platform space, right? And again, over the last few years, I mean, it's a great space to work in, right? Salaries are going in one direction, and there's more and more demand than there is supply for these individuals. So I guess is there, in terms of kind of speaking to people that are kind of maybe thinking about careers in IT and maybe are, I guess, because there's probably a lot more people now we see it that are kind of in help desk roles and sort of junior infrastructure roles that are kind of looking at different career paths to go down. I guess, what would you sort of say to those individuals around that space? And I guess in terms of kind of maybe some of the other people that maybe could, like, because I guess some of the companies we work with, it's trying to kind of then bring people in they can cross train and sort of maybe from other areas. So I suppose for you, what would kind of your advice be to those people that kind of saying, look, actually don't necessarily think it is like that. This is what it is actually like, and maybe here's some of the baseline skills. And if you were to come in, then this is maybe a really good path for you to follow.
Yeah, I think I feel really passionate about platform. I think the platform is the engine of a technology organization. It provides, it can do one of two things. It can be a source of friction and frustration for the rest of the organization, or it can be a force multiplier. A very small team, through implementation of self-serve mechanisms to support the business and tooling that can support the business to do its job better, is really exciting, right? So I know that lots of people go, I want to be a software developer, and I speak to people, who are in like maybe customer services or something like that, and they've got some aptitude. Go, I want to be an apps developer, because that's where you can really see the result of your endeavor in real time, right? But platforms are slower burn, but with a much bigger payoff in my point of view, where I stand. And so it's kind of like, I think, how can we kind of sell the virtues of that, and how actually, I tell this to my platform team all the time, you're actually helping the business to be more reliable, more scalable, and deliver more product more quickly to our customers. It's kind of, they're the 10x factor of your entire business, and like so it's I think it's a rock star role myself. But I would say that's my background. But it's but it's a really, really important role, and it's an exciting role, and there's so much. It's not just one thing. It's like, are we provisioning infrastructure? Are we thinking about how we manage our secrets? Are we thinking about how we deliver scalable pipelines for our members, our developers? Are we thinking about developer experience? Are we building tools that are making it easier for our developers to do? But you think about Netflix has always been the poster child for this kind of thing, and the stuff that they did with the Simian Army and Zool and things like that, which they then open sourced. Their platform team did that. So this is,
the young sung hero sat in the background, isn't it, really?
Exactly. It's a cracking role.
Good. Okay. And then just on to that stuff. So I suppose, kind of like I said earlier on, I guess the traditional route to get into a career in IT is you go to university, you then go and get your first graduate role, and then you kind of climb the ranks, right? Which is great. But I think, as we're seeing sort of post-COVID as well, sort of university is not an option for everybody. And I guess, like I said, trying to encourage more kind of diverse workforces into tech, then obviously we don't necessarily want to look at everyone coming through university. I guess it's still a really valid and a great way to start your career, but there are so many other different ways of doing it. So I suppose, what are your views on things like kind of apprenticeships, kind of the boot camps? I guess, what are they worthwhile? Do you think you can still get to the same levels that if someone who has come through the traditional university route? What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, some of the best engineers I know never went to university, and in fact, in many ways, we were talking about diversity before, right? If you've not been through a formal computer science education, it makes you think about things slightly differently. Generally, if you've kind of been, these folks are mega curious, and curiosity, by the way, is one of the key behaviours that I look for. But these folks are mega curious. They often spend hours of their own time tinkering on this stuff, because they've got a day job that they have to go to, and they do this stuff on the side, so they're super motivated. So when you talk about behaviours, you've got curiosity, you've got self-starting, you've got that ability to learn and assimilate and retain information. It's like, why wouldn't I want these people? It's like, and then it's, how do you cage that? Not in a bad way, but not in a way that you literally put them in a cage. But it's like, how do you then, how do we then to almost productionize it, right, and turn it into something that can deliver value to customers?
And I suppose on that, right, I was just thinking while you were talking, how, from again a hiring manager, a manager of hiring managers, right, what advice would you give to those people, right, to how they actually get that first role? Because again, I mean, if look, you got two CVs, one CV, Red Brick University, first class, nice looking CV, right? Other person's CV, another career, can demonstrate, hey, look, I love doing X. Here's some kind of, how would you advise this person to kind of at least get their CV to be looked at alongside this one?
Realistically, if quite often, if a business is looking for a specific role, businesses tend to hire at the point in time that they need that resource, right? And so realistically, that individual's not probably going to get considered, right? It's kind of like, I need someone who's got these skills, who's got them now, and that I need to join my team. Instead, what I would say is, if you're really interested, join a company where you're really interested in their mission and what they're doing and what they're building, and join a part of the organization that you are skilled to be in, right? So join customer services, join accounts, join whatever part of the procurement, join whatever part of the organization that you can do. And then because every part of the organization is technology now, and there's no part of any organization that doesn't use technology. And in fact, it's only going to become more so as we kind of go on, particularly with all the latest kind of AI stuff that's going on at the moment. And so join a part of the organization that you can join, and then build some relationships within that organization. Do you perhaps you build some relationships with some folks in tech support, perhaps you build some relationships, you get involved in some initiatives that are going on, or you hear they're building a new, some new back office system. Can I get involved in that? And can I maybe be a test user, or can I then start to suggest improvements? And then you can build those relationships, demonstrate that you are keen and interested and curious, and then and that's the way in there. And then people are much, when you're within an organization and you've built those relationships, people are more prepared to invest time and effort in moving that on. I think, unless organizations are doing specific internships or boot camps where they're making a decision that I'm going to put aside some investment for this, just spraying CVs to jobs that you fancy, hoping to compete with people who have got the right skills, that's never going to work.
No, I think that's some really good advice, isn't it? And then sort of getting into the company and, like you said, building relationships and then sort of working your way over, I think is brilliant. And then sort of on the other end of the spectrum, right? Because I'm sure there's a number of people that be listening and watching this that are already in a career in technology. Maybe they're sort of a lead developer, a dev manager, that have kind of got those aspirations to get to the level that you are. I suppose what would kind of be that, and it's putting you on the spot a little bit, but that kind of silver bullet bit of advice you kind of say to kind of to get there. What is kind of, what is that? Is there that silver bullet, or is it a multitude of things you kind of just need to be? How do you do it?
There's a lot of things, and no person is an island either. And so I've been fortunate enough to forge some really brilliant mentorship relationships throughout my career. So throughout my career, I have had people who have mentored me, who have advocated for me. Now, that doesn't come for free, right? That requires investment of your time, and you have to build that relationship. You have to build trust with that person, because when they advocate for you, as well as your reputation, right? And so they have to, there's a lot of work that goes into doing that, but building those relationships with people in your organization and outside of your organization, actually, I think has certainly in my career been absolutely an essential part of my success. I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't be here without those people.
That's brilliant. And I guess, look, because mentors something that kind of pops up on these podcasts quite often, right? And I suppose for someone who likes the idea that you kind of loosely mentioned it, and you've got to invest into it, you've got to build the relationships. But how do you pick who's your mentor? Do you go and pick a CTO that's already there, or because some people say you do, some people say, well, actually go and pick someone who doesn't work in technology because you'll get a very different perspective. How do you decide who it needs to be, and two, how do you do it? Just rock up to their desk one day and get, hey, Noosh, do you want to be my mentor?
It's never that kind of transactional. It kind of involves. It's that I found that these relationships that I've built are where I've ended up with mentors and advocates. I've developed quite organically over a period of time, because the trust element of it is such an important thing. So if you just rock up to somebody and say, be my mentor, that might work. But I think it's more likely that if you can demonstrate that it's worth their time investing in you, then they're going to be more likely to be helpful. And I think, and it can't just be this thing where you just take, right? It has to be something where, people in my career, the people who've advocated for me have done so with reason, right? I've done something, or I've delivered something good, and then they go, oh, okay, she's doing a job for me and she's helping me out. I feel confident to be able to support her. But it's all about whatever you do, don't write anybody off either, because there are some people in your organisation who might be even the same level as you, or even a level down, who you can build. And dynamics change over time, and you end up with the person that you came up with maybe together, and then they end up being your mentor. It's kind of one of those things. It's like, if there are people who you think are going to help you out and provide you with that guidance, then you're always on show, right? It's like you've always got to make that effort, and it is effort. It's not having a mentor isn't just, oh, someone's going to rock up and say that Noosh is great. It's like, why are they going to do that? What's in it? Why would they bother?
It's a really good answer. It's really good advice there. So thank you for that. I think people will get a good bit of benefit from that. Couple of last questions, and then I'll let you crack on with your evening. Look, clearly being at the level you're at, time is probably something you've never got enough of, right? And there's always a million plates to spin and fires to put out, both, I guess, probably professional and personal life. How do you do that? How do you perform at the level you're expected to perform at? I suppose both professionally, and I'm guessing kind of having a family, there's probably a level you've got to perform at in that family as well. What's your kind of secret tips, advice, learnings over your careers to kind of help you make this all?
Boundaries is one of the main ones, and making sure that you make time to look after yourself. So I make sure that I exercise pretty much every day. These are kind of rules of thumb. Sometimes things happen, in work or at home, that mean that this kind of all goes to pot. But as a general rule, I try and make time for myself to exercise first thing in the morning. I spend an hour a day on kind of development stuff, so learning new stuff. I only work in this office, and so I've been remote now for probably 3 and a bit years, and the laptop doesn't leave this room unless I'm traveling for work. I don't go into the bedroom with my laptop. I don't go in the lounge on the laptop. That door is shut. That's it. I'm at work. And then I shut the door. I'm not at work anymore. I'm with my family, and so in that way, kind of remote is a bit of a blessing and a curse, right? It's great. It gives you that flexibility to be able to kind of plan your day around stuff, but it's also very tempting to be at work all the time. So it's just being intentional about setting your boundaries, and making sure that you do that, because otherwise, it would be, you could work all of the hours in the day. There's always enough to do, right? It's just and being okay with kind of almost being accepting of the fact that you're just not going to be able to do everything. You can't everyone who wants to see you can't see everyone. It's like you just have to accept that.
Yeah, fair play. I like that bit of advice about leaving the laptop in one room. I'm guilty of it. My mind follows me around everywhere. But yeah, no, I really like that. That's
Yeah.
really good. Good, thank you. Right, 3 quick fire ones. They're pretty good to keep you on the toes. One's an obvious one, right? So I'm sure you roll this one off the tongue. If you could kind of go back to Noosh when she was kind of finishing university and give her one bit of advice from everything you've learned to now, what would it be?
It would be that everything's going to be okay. It's kind of like I remember when I was quite a young developer, and you get some major incident happening. You'd never seen it before. You'd never seen this sequence of events happening. At that point in time, thinking, this is broken. I'm never going to be able to fix it. And of course, after hours of blood, sweat, and tears and swearing, you fix it. And what you learn is you do that every single time that happens. And I could have saved myself a whole ton of anxiety if I could have just told myself, you'll always fix it, don't worry.
Good. I like that answer. That's a good one. Right, next one. If you could learn any skill or subject instantly, what would it be and why?
Play the piano.
Fair play.
I'm learning the piano and I suck at it. And I really do. And it's like, I would just love to there's so much amazing piano music that I would just love to be able to play. And when I do play, it's kind of, that's one of the things that is in my office. It's one of the few times where I'm so rubbish at it, the concentration of trying to play the note, make the notes come out of my fingers, it makes me forget about everything. It's almost like a meditation thing. So that's what I would love to do. I'd love to be able to play the piano.
Good. All right. Last one, right? There's a caveat to this. You can't answer AI, but if you say AI, it's got to be a blooming good answer. All right. Yeah, so what's the most innovative or game-changing technology you've come across recently, and how do you think it will impact society in the future?
So I'm not going to say AI.
Good.
I think some of the changes, some of the innovations that are happening at the moment on the blockchain, particularly Bitcoin, are really exciting, controversial, diverse, kind of really splitting the Bitcoin community. But somebody found actually a bit of a flaw in a recent upgrade to the Bitcoin protocol. That means that now we can basically put any kind of token on, inscribe ordinals onto the blockchain. And I think from an adoptability point of view and making Bitcoin more accessible to everybody and meaningful, I think that's really exciting. It's very divisive. Lots of people in the Bitcoin community absolutely hate it. But I think it's quite exciting, and I'd be interested to see what happens with it.
Good. Okay. And I've got to ask from a personal perspective, if nothing else. So, what do you think the future of Bitcoin is going to be? Because when it was all first going, everyone was, it's going to be the new currency of the world, and sort of. Do you think is that still the case, or do you think there's going to be much more specific uses for it, and currencies as we know it will still be here?
Yeah, I think it's going to take time, but I think ultimately Bitcoin will become the kind of main store of value globally. But other currencies will continue to exist on a local basis, and other tokens, right? Bitcoin won't exist in isolation. There'll be other tokens that have different use cases, but in terms of a store of value, a unit of account, at the moment everything's the dollar. But I do see a time in the future, and I'm not saying it's happening next year or even in the next 10 years, but I think I do see a time where this uncensorable, finite source of funds will become the global unit of account and source of wealth.
Interesting. We shall see. I think it would be let's see what happens, but it'll be good. But look, Nish, look, I really appreciate that. Thank you. I think we've gone over some really, really interesting subjects in the what 45 minutes. So look,
Cool.
really appreciate you giving up your time with everything you're going on. I'm guessing you're gonna hop on the piano now and start knocking out some tunes. But no, thank you very much.
Yeah, I think so. Chill out for a bit.
Good, but no, it's been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.